the March 12, 2025 meeting of the House Public Safety meeting to order. A quorum is present. If we don't complete our work today by the committee's adjournment time of 4:45, we will recess and reconvene in this room at 6:15 p.m. today or at the call of the chair. Before beginning our meeting, I want to remind everyone that the committee expects proper decorum at all times. All dialogue goes through the chair. Signs are not allowed in the committee room. There will be no outbursts, clapping, or shouting. There is no standing or sitting in the walkways and aisles. If an accommodation is needed, communicate with the sergeant staff. There will be consequences if there is a disruption. Thank you to the sergeant at arms staff who are present for helping maintain decorum in the committee room. Representative Moeller, have you had a chance to review the minutes of the March 11th, 2025 meeting?
I have, Mr. Chair, and I move their approval.
Representative Moeller moves approval of the March 11th, 2025 minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries and the minutes of the March 11th, 2025 meeting are approved. First bill on the agenda today is House File 897. Representative Knudsen, please come to the table with your testifier. Representative Knudsen, since you are not a member of this committee, I will move House File 897 before the committee with a recommendation to re-refer House File 897 to Family, or Children and Families, Finance and Policy Committee. Representative Knudsen, I believe you also have an author's amendment, DE1. I will move your amendment before the committee. Please explain your amendment.
Thank you, Chair Novotny. The DE1 is based off of recommendations from the Minnesota County Attorney Association, and it just adds fentanyl to the title, and then the definition of fentanyl in Chapter 152.137, Subdivision 25.
I believe that was in response to recommendations or requests for clarification from the County Attorneys Association. We have a copy of that letter in the pack for everyone that wants to read that. Any questions on Representative Knudsen's amendment, the DE1? All in favor of adopting the DE1 amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The amendment is adopted. Representative Knudsen, please explain your bill as amended.
Thank you, Chair Novotny and members. House File 897, as amended, aligns the criminal penalty for exposing children and vulnerable adults to fentanyl with current statutes for methamphetamine exposure. Unfortunately, the need for this legislation has been born out of many tragic situations, including the death of an 18-month-old toddler this last Christmas Day. There should be actually, I think, an article in your packets about that situation and another one regarding the death of a 3-year-old due to the exposure of fentanyl. I do have some testifiers with me today that would like to further explain the need for this legislation. I'd like to move to that now. Thank you.
See, we have 2 testifiers at the table. Would the testifiers begin by stating their name and begin their testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Sebastian Mesa. I am an assistant county attorney in Aiken County. I came here to support this bill. I wrote to Representative Knudsen regarding this proposed legislative action because I've had cases in my county where I've been limited, not able to prosecute them appropriately. As you all know, 152.137 makes it a felony to expose a child or vulnerable adult to methamphetamine knowingly. And it struck me as rather peculiar that a drug as dangerous as fentanyl, a drug that is far more dangerous than methamphetamine in terms of the amount that is required to cause a person to suffer an overdose, would not fit under that same legislative scheme. Happily, Representative Knudsen and Senator Utke have championed this bill. I think it's significant. Some folks will say, well, overdoses are down, and that is true. Thank God, because of Narcan and the efforts of first responders, we have seen a marked decrease in overdose deaths across the entire state, up from a 5-year high with the pandemic. However, fentanyl is still a danger to all our communities in outstate Minnesota, where I am from, and the cities, the metro area. And non-fatal overdoses, and I'm basing this on the data available from the Minnesota Department of Health, non-fatal overdoses involving fentanyl have continued to rise. As far as 2023, which was the last year that I could look at, I don't know if the committee has access to more recent information, but that's on 11% increase. When you remove heroin from the opioid overdoses, you see that that line continues to climb. And that is due to fentanyl, an extremely dangerous drug. The situation that motivated me to come forward was a child that was exposed through crushed fentanyl, sitting on a nightstand with a fan aimed at it, and that child and other children had their cribs in that same room. I can't imagine that any of us would sit here and think that is not felony level behavior. It is. And this is not a partisan issue. It is about similarly situated defendants being treated similarly. Fentanyl and methamphetamine are both dangerous drugs, and fentanyl should be considered at least as dangerous, at least as toxic to children and vulnerable adults as methamphetamine is. And if you consider, well, fentanyl disproportionately affects minority communities, Native American, Black and brown communities. If you believe that to be true, then I would argue to you that those communities, those children, those vulnerable adults deserve just as much protection as white communities who are more affected by methamphetamine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I yield.
Next testifier looks like Chief Potts. Chief Potts, say your full name and begin your testimony.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Jeff Potts, Executive Director for the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association. And I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association in support of House File 897. To be honest and frank about this issue, fentanyl, opioids in general, and specifically fentanyl, continues to wreak havoc on our state and on our country. Sebastian, Mr. Mesa mentioned there is a decrease in overdose deaths, but let's put that in context that in 2023, there were still 1,338 overdose deaths, 919 of those related to opioids. Now, we've seen some preliminary data for 2024, but we're still talking probably close to 1,000 deaths, and perhaps 70, 80, maybe 90% of those could be attributed to fentanyl. And so it's still a major issue. The drug task forces throughout the state continue to see fentanyl on nearly every drug that they seize, whether it be cocaine, methamphetamine, or even pills. It's mixed into these pills, most of which are counterfeit pills. According to the DEA, 6 out of 10 counterfeit pills contain a lethal amount of fentanyl. 6 out of 10. So people may not even know that the pill that they're taking contains, in most cases don't know that it's a lethal amount. They may not even know that it contains fentanyl. And so we believe as an association that this bill will help. Unfortunately, the incidents that the author spoke about, a 3-year-old, an 18-month-old, the case that the previous testifier spoke about is happening far too frequently, where these drugs are in close proximity to kids, children in daycares, children in homes. Our drug task force is seeing this on a regular basis. And again, we want to thank the author for bringing this bill forward. And again, want to say that the Chiefs Association supports this bill, and thank you for allowing me to testify here today.
Thank you, Chief. Last testifier is Paul Ostro from Fentanyl Free Communities. Mr. Ostro, please state your full name and begin your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you so much, and many thanks to Chair Novotny and the author, Representative Knudsen, and all the authors of this bill. My name is Paul Ostrow, spelled O-S-T-R-O-W. I'm here today in my capacity as Chair of Fentanyl Free Communities, and I'm also a retired prosecutor. I'm hoping that today this is an issue that you can all agree upon, and hopefully everyone here can, if not be an author, can support it regardless of political party. We believe as an organization that of all the issues we face, there is none that demands bipartisanship more than this one. As I mentioned, I am the chair of Fentanyl Free Communities. It is a nonpartisan and a non-ideological organization. We are laser focused on saving lives lost to fentanyl. We are laser focused on education and advocacy. We are a powerful partnership between former elected officials such as myself, public safety leaders, and parents who have lost loved ones to fentanyl. Our goal is to ensure that institutions throughout Minnesota, and specifically the Minnesota legislature, enact best practices and direct resources wherever needed to attack this epidemic. I am a former elected official. I served as Minneapolis City Council President 20 years ago in a different era. But more importantly for today's discussion, I am a career prosecutor who was the chief narcotics trafficking prosecutor in Anoka County for the last decade of my career. I saw firsthand the toll of fentanyl on our communities. I prosecuted fentanyl dealers, and I worked with the families of victims whose children were poisoned by fentanyl. In January of this year, our policy committee developed our legislative agenda, which was approved by our board of directors. One of the priority issues on our agenda is, to quote, heightened criminal penalties for parents or caretakers of juveniles who expose children to fentanyl. Our full agenda will be available on our website, fentanylfreecommunities.org, by early next week. And I must add that we are ready to partner with any legislators and assist in garnering support for any legislation that will save lives in Minnesota. This legislation, frankly, is a complete no-brainer. I've successfully prosecuted individuals under the existing statute, including a case that went to the Court of Appeals. But let's get real, as the other testifiers and the Aiken County attorney mentioned. While exposure to methamphetamine by a child is certainly harmful and dangerous and life-threatening, exposure to fentanyl is a likely death sentence for many juveniles. There is simply no logical argument for protecting children from exposure to methamphetamine while failing to protect children from fentanyl. The problem is growing exponentially. According to the United States Poison Center, and we do consider fentanyl a poison, infant exposure to fentanyl increased by 449% between 2020 and 2023. Think about that for a moment. 2 milligrams of fentanyl can kill an adult. How much fentanyl do you think can kill a newborn or an infant? And consider, even a tiny portion of a pill or a trace amount of cocaine or methamphetamine with fentanyl in it could kill an infant or a child. Fentanyl Free Communities is a strong proponent of treatment, police-initiated diversion and deflection, and harm reduction through the widespread availability of Narcan. We are an all-hands-on-deck organization. But there must also be a place in society and for this legislature to state unequivocally that if you endanger the life of a precious child or infant through the possession and exposure of fentanyl, there will be criminal consequences. The protection of those unable to protect themselves must continue to be a fundamental value of our state. Thanks again for the opportunity to address you, and again, thanks so much to the author.
Thank you. There being no other signed up testifiers, members, do you have any questions? We'll start with Lead Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Knudsen, for bringing this bill. I do support it. We are planning on supporting it today. It kind of got the feeling from the testifiers that there was this idea that maybe we weren't going to support it, but we are. I do have a question, though, for you, and actually got this idea when I was looking at the bill that was pulled from the agenda today. And thinking about this, there are legal uses of fentanyl for medical purposes. I believe they're prescribed after surgeries, for cancer treatments, things like that, which of course, children and vulnerable adults could get for a valid purpose. And so I would love to see some sort of exception perhaps carved into your bill that makes it clear that if it's used or prescribed by a medical professional or distributed by a pharmacist, for example, that they wouldn't fall under this bill. And I'm just wondering if you'd be receptive to an amendment like that.
Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Mueller. Yes, we can talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Lead Mueller.
Yep, thank you. And I'll just say that that bill that Representative Rymer had that was pulled, House File 1446, had an exception, and that may be a good place to start. I don't know if that's the exact language, but anyway, I thought that was nice that they had put that exception into that bill. And like I said, we plan on supporting this bill. I'll just remind the committee that we worked with Representative Baker over the last few years to increase penalties and modernize our statutes with respect to fentanyl, while also recognizing the public health crisis that it is, making sure that our first responders have opioid antagonists on them. We made sure that all schools also have Narcan and other opioid antagonists, which is so important, and we understand that it's been saving lives having that, recognizing that this is a public health crisis. Again, we're going to support this. A lot of the things that you were saying as you were talking also made me think about firearms storage and how it's too unfortunate we can't get that across the finish line in a bipartisan support, since guns are the leading cause of death of children and adolescents in this country. But be that as it may, we support things that protect the lives of children and are happy to vote yes on this. Thank
And
you.
can I just say, I really appreciate your leadership
Mr.
and
Oster.
the bipartisan leadership on the bills that you referenced.
Anyone else? I will renew my motion to recommend, I'm sorry, what?
okay. That's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Close your remarks, Representative
Sure,
Knudsen.
I'll keep it short. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee, for letting us hear this bill. It really is about protecting children and vulnerable adults, and this is a big gap we have right now. So thank you for the bipartisan support, and hopefully we can get this across the finish line. So, thank you.
And with that, I will renew my motion to recommend that House File 897 is re-referred to the Children and Families Finance and Policy Committee. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The motion carries, and House 897 is re-referred to Children and Families. Thank you, Representative Knudsen, and your testifier. The next bill on the agenda is House File 772. Chair Swedzinski, please come to the table with your. Chair Swedzinski, since you are not a member of this committee, I will move the file 772 before the committee with a recommendation that the bill is re-referred to Human Services, Finance, and Policy Committee. Chair Swedzinski, I believe that you have an author's amendment, A1, and I will move your amendment before the committee. Please explain your amendment.
Yes, the House File 772A1 amendment, simply on line 16, page 1, line 16 deletes undocumented, does the same on page 2, lines 5 through 15, eliminates the word undocumented. And then on line 1.16, if you look at the bill, it gets rid of a suspected undocumented person and inserts a certain non-citizens are. That's what the amendment does. It cleans it up a little bit to just get around the language and kind of get it in the shape that we'd like it to get. So thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion on the A1 amendment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the vote. All in favor of adopting the A1 amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The amendment is adopted. Chair Swedzinski, please explain your bill as amended.
Yes, thank you, Chair Novotny. Thank you, members of the committee. House File 772 is, first and foremost, it's an update to current, it updates current law that requires the Department of Corrections and civil commitments to report to ICE when it appears an alien has been committed to their facilities. This original bill was actually passed in 1927, so just a hair under 100 years old. The last time this law was updated was in 2002, where some minor changes were made to it. And if you look at the language, the base language, the state law only refers to 2 state correctional facilities, because in 1927 there were only 2 state facilities, the one in St. Cloud and the one in Stillwater. And since that time we have a total of 11 facilities in our state, and so it brings that up to where it needs to be. Current law also references persons convicted of a felony or who is mentally ill. House File 772 separates these offenses from persons of civility committed to into a different section of law. So it essentially gets them out of the same area and moves them into 2 different areas of statute. And one of the main reasons this bill is before you is because we just don't actually know if state and local correctional facilities are just complying with current state law. House File 772 requires them to verify compliance. Our state correctional facilities, from our conversations with them, are doing this and are actively working with this, but some of the questions that we do have is on the local level, whether or not these things are taking place. And then finally, just a hindrance of the A1 amendment kind of cleans up some of the language that may be a bit out of date. And so, that's what the bill does, and I appreciate any questions you may have. I do not have testifiers, but if someone from the public is wanting to come up, we've got plenty of room up here.
We do have 2 testifiers signed up. Julia Decker, Policy Director, Immigrant Law Center of Minneapolis, and Elder Castillo, Immigration Policy Attorney, Hennepin County Attorney's Office. Ms. Decker, please keep testimony at around 2 minutes and say your full name and begin testifying when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Good afternoon. My name is Julia Decker. I'm the Policy Director for Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, or ILCM. ILCM is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that provides free legal services for immigrants and refugees across Minnesota. We are here to respectfully express opposition to HF 772. First and foremost, immigration enforcement is a federal government function. Obligating state and local authorities to help carry out that function runs counter to baseline principles of federalism and anti-commandeering. In addition, we are concerned that the amended language of HF 772 creates real possibilities for erroneous and potentially discriminatory notifications about people in state custody. The bill language appears to expand the requirement to assess, expands the requirement of state and local officials to assess whether a person appears to be a non-citizen. We're concerned about this for a couple of reasons. First, immigration statuses and authorizations are complex. A person born outside U.S. borders may in fact be a U.S. citizen. A person with a final order of deportation may in fact hold work authorization because they would face torture if they were deported. A person can appear to be many things based on race, ethnicity, or even immigration paperwork, but their actual immigration situation may be both nuanced and complicated. Second, we note that federal immigration landscape is currently changing on an almost day-to-day basis. Humanitarian immigration programs such as temporary protected status and parole are being restricted or terminated, and lawsuits are being filed. Asking state and local officials to understand these many different immigration statuses, the effect of programmatic changes, the outcomes of lawsuits that have been filed, are being filed, will be filed, and then assess people in their custody for these various things creates a substantial and ongoing administrative burden, which takes resources away from state and local public safety. And for that reason, we respectfully ask that the committee vote no on HF 772. Thank you.
Next is Elder Castillo. Mr. Castillo, when you sit down, give your full name and begin your testimony.
My name is Eder Castillo. I'm a senior assistant county attorney at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. I've spent my entire legal career as a prosecutor. I've asked for prison sentences. I've protected our senior citizens from financial exploitation as a member of the complex financial crimes team, and I've prosecuted other violent crimes. I also advise my office on immigration policy. Every day, prosecutors across the state bring criminal defendants to justice, ensuring that the most violent and dangerous offenders serve hard time in our prisons and jails. HF 772 would make securing jail and prison sentences more difficult. In 2021, 98.5% of felony convictions throughout Minnesota were obtained without a trial. And that's coming from the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission statistics report in 2021. By forcing jail and prisons to report inmates to ICE, HF 772 would make it more difficult for prosecutors to negotiate guilty pleas for the most violent non-citizen offenders, because those pleas are typically conditioned on prison or jail time, and non-citizens would be willing to roll the dice. By making it more difficult to obtain plea agreements on jail or prison time, HF 772 will increase trial loads for prosecutors who already spend sleepless nights preparing multiple trials a week against our most dangerous offenders. It would force victims to have to come in and testify more often, including children who have gone through traumatic experiences who would have to face their abusers and look them in the eyes. It would force police officers to get off of our streets, stop patrolling, stop investigating, stop training, and instead come in to testify more often. And it would increase the risk that violent and dangerous offenders will be acquitted at trial. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office joins the Minnesota Sheriff's Association and the Association of Minnesota Counties in urging this committee to reject HF 772 for our public safety. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before I go any farther, Representative, you made a statement that they oppose it. We received a letter that said they have concerns about language that's in the bill. Members, do we have any questions for Chair Swedzinski or his testifiers? Representative Feist.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't see you, but I know you're there. Oh, hi. So I have concerns with this underlying statute as it existed before your bill to amend it. I'd considered introducing a bill to repeal it altogether, but then didn't get around to it. But I really do believe that entanglement of our state agencies and our local government and federal immigration law is really problematic. Immigration law is so complicated, and especially in this context, when we're talking about people who are incarcerated and also struggling with mental illness, I think it's even more complicated. Also, I'll just note, it's just kind of interesting that the statute was originally from 1927, because that was just a terrible time in immigration history in the United States. We passed the 1924 Act. What was it called? Anyway, it was like it was like the national origins, where we just kind of divided the world up by race. Our modern immigration laws started in 1952, and it was an effort to go away from where we had gone in the 1920s. So I think that's a reason to revisit this statute, because that was sort of what it was born from, which was this really erroneous concept that we conflate immigrants with criminals. And I just encourage members to look. The Cato Institute, which is a conservative organization, has some materials that they submitted just showing that immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, commit crimes at lower rates than people born in the United States. And I just wanted to lift up that data. I don't think that this amended language is really that problematic. I think that the underlying statute is based on some erroneous, problematic assumptions. And so I just wanted to raise those concerns. Thank you.
Lead Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll just echo what Vice Chair Feist, soon-to-be Vice Chair Feist, said. I think especially with the amendment that you offered today, less concerned about the bill now with the amendment that you offered, but do have issues really kind of with the underlying statute, especially around the word, if it appears the person is an alien. I think that appearance is problematic, but again, that's in the underlying statute. So I think the fact that your language is really, my understanding, putting into practice what is done already. I'm okay with moving the bill today. Just want to say that really the underlying statute itself is what I think has more problems, but I'm still prepared to vote yes today.
Closing arguments.
Thank you, Chair
Swedzinski.
Novotny. Chair Mueller, I have spoken with the representatives from the sheriff's organizations, and we do look forward to continue to work on this bill as it potentially moves forward. I do believe that, we do have a role in this, and we do have an opportunity to make sure that we are, state, local governments are within compliance with the law. We can make a disagreement whether or not we like the law or not, but it's important that as legislators that we try to do our best job to make sure that we are in compliance with state law. So that can be a different debate, maybe for a different day, whether or not this should be part of our portfolio of things that we get to do. But at the end of the day, I think it's, we're seeing that this is a big conversation that's happened nationally and within our state as well. And so with that, I just appreciate your vote. Thank you.
I renew my motion to House File 772 amended is recommended to be re-referred to the Human Services, Finance, and Policy Committee. All in favor of this signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries, and House File 772 as amended is re-referred to Human Services. Thank you, Chair Swedzinski. The last bill on the agenda today is House File 16. Representative Rymer, please come to the table with your testifiers. Representative Rymer, since you are not a member of the committee, I will move your bill before the committee with a recommendation. It is re-referred to Elections, Finance, and Government Operations. Please explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the Public Safety Committee for meeting on this bill today. I want to yield some time for my testifiers here, so I'll be very quick in what this bill does. This bill, it accomplishes two main things. The first is that it mandates any illegal immigrant arrested on suspicion of a violent crime as defined by Minnesota State Statute 624-172, Subdivision 5, even in cases where the county attorney elects not to prosecute, be reported to ICE. Secondly, this bill prevents state and local entities from actively prohibiting, restricting, or interfering with federal immigration authorities in carrying out the federal immigration enforcement. And just to kind of outline the statute that we're talking about when we talk about violent crime, this bill is narrow in focus. When we talk about that specific statute, we're talking about murder, assault, domestic assault, crimes committed for the benefit of a gang, robbery, carjacking, kidnapping, and criminal sexual conduct. And what the motive is for this bill is to open up a line of communication between local authorities and dealing with dangerous criminals who should not be in our community. That is what this bill does. And right now we find ourselves at a moment where you have local officials who are openly defying immigration enforcement and the language around it, from the Minneapolis mayor to the Hennepin County prosecutor. And what we're trying to do is say we want to open up a line of communication between local authorities who are on the ground, who deal with these people all the time, and make sure that we're actually reporting potentially dangerous criminals in our community. And there are real-world implications to this bill, some of which you will hear about today. And with that, I'll go back to the chair.
Thank you. We have testifiers signed up. We have Charles Thayer. Mr. Thayer, please state your full name and begin your testimony.
Thank you for having me here today. My name is Charles Thayer. I'm here to talk about the death and brutal murder of my mother, America Thayer. In order to understand the true impact this has had on my family, you should probably know a little bit about the history of my mother and I. She and I were both born in Dominican Republic. She had me when she was 16 years young. When I was 4 years old, we legally migrated to the United States together. She was so excited to start her new life with my father and I in the promised land, the home of the free, Los Estados Unidos. Being that she was such a young lady, it literally felt like we were brother and sister still learning the language and culture together. I loved having such a young mother. I always thought I was so lucky that I would be able to share a very long life with her because of her age. She was a young, fun, and vibrant lady with tons of class and a magnetic personality. Everyone she came in contact with would fall in love with her, and she had a smile that would light up any occasion. She's very loyal to my much older father and stayed with him until he passed at the age of 81. After that, she was in a transition stage in her life and decided it would be best for her to be closer to her sisters, so she moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where she could start a new chapter. My mother and I were in regular contact. We always made it a point to stay connected. About 7 years ago, my mother told me about a new guy friend she was talking to. Of course, we all wanted her to be happy, so we embraced and supported her having a new relationship. Shortly after they started dating, my mother would call me up regarding the financial issues she was having and not being able to pay her bills and make ends meet. This was odd for her to do. After sending her money several times, she continued to ask for more. After sending her more and more, she continued asking about once per month. And I also received a call from her concerned boss of the retail store she worked at, asking me if I knew anything about this new guy she was dating. Her boss told me she was starting to miss work regularly. She also told me that her new boyfriend would take her car while she was working and return it to pick her up after her shift. She said he would even sometimes wait all day outside the store for her to finish working. Everyone knew something was off about this relationship and had a very bad feeling about him. This went on until my mother was eventually fired for the first time ever from her work. Since all this was so odd, we as a family began getting more and more concerned about who this new boyfriend of her was. We ended up doing some research on him and found out that he was an illegal alien and a convicted felon in another state. What was even more scary was that he was convicted of trying to stab his previous girlfriend and went to prison for it. My mother would regularly try to convince us that he was a good guy and he would never hurt her. That was until she called me up a few weeks later crying about him beating her up, and she ended up having a broken wrist. This is when we knew she was with a woman abuser. We still never would have imagined what would eventually have happened to her and why we're all here today. The concern we had for her would remain, but the contact I had with her was becoming less and less. I would only hear from her when she was needing money or when he would beat her up and threaten her life. Those calls would continue to get more and more desperate over the years. After sending them tens of thousands of dollars in payments for vehicles and deposits on apartments, their situation stayed the same and would always revert to rock bottom. They ended up homeless, unemployed together, but of course, unemployed was his regular status. She would work and earn the money from 3 jobs, and he would wait for her to bring it home so he could spend it on drugs, alcohol, nothing productive, and then beat her up some more. Eventually, we gave my mother a way out, moved back with us to Minnesota, and leave the abuser behind. She did take up our offer, and we flew her back to Minnesota with a one-way ticket. This was another new start for her. But after just a few weeks, she was talking to him again. She eventually convinced us that he wanted to change, that he wanted to get his citizenship, earn a job, and build a family with her. Her desire to get back with him eventually got to us even, and we decided to help him and her so they could be together and start over again closer to us. We paid for him to come to Minnesota. We gave him money so he could start the process and become a citizen. We bought them another car so they could commute to work, and we paid for another deposit on an apartment. Things seemed well for about 2 weeks, and then the phone rang again. Son, he beat the crap out of me. My mother would plead as she cried hysterically. She would leave him. Then a few days later, she would take him back. This happened so many times. Sometimes the police were called and sometimes not. Eventually, we as a family told her he was just too dangerous to bring around the rest of us. So if she wanted an in-person relationship with us, she would have to leave him. Unfortunately, my mom could not find a way out. She said he would kill her if he knew that she was going to leave him. I still could not understand how a grown, capable man could allow his girlfriend to work 3 jobs to support them both and show his appreciation by beating her up regularly and constantly controlling her in every move. She could not even answer the phone without him listening in the background for something he didn't like, so he could beat her up later because of it. This continued regularly, and about a year before he successfully murdered her, he made his first attempt to kill her. He beat her up in a Bloomington apartment they had, doused her entirely in gasoline, and started the place on fire. This was on the news. She escaped with only minor injuries, but he had a standoff with police and eventually jumped out of a second-story window down onto parked cars below, where he would get arrested for several crimes committed that day, including arson and whatever. We honestly thought this would be the end, or the proverbial straw, that would make her realize just how dangerous he was. If my mother only loved herself as much as we all loved her, this would have been the end. But she worried about him, and in her loyal, loving fashion, she forgave him and took him back. She wrote a letter to the judge in Shakopee, begging for him to be allowed bail and promising she would see to it that he returned for his arson case for all the dates and the sentencing. The judge in that case allowed for bail, and of course, my mother scratched, begged, and borrowed enough money from friends and colleagues to bail him out. This would prove to be her final fatal move. The day he killed her, she was bringing him to a final court appearance where he would be sentenced and incarcerated, hopefully. He ended up beating her skull in with a blunt object and cut her head off at the neck in broad daylight right in front of a busy intersection while she was still alive in Shakopee. I will never grow old with my mother as I thought I would when I was a young boy. My children will no longer have their grandmother to share stories and laugh with. My aunt lost her sister and best friend. The world lost a special ray of light in all of the darkness. Our family will never be the same without her, and this has left an ugly stain on our family and our legacy. The only question I really have left is how anybody on any side of any aisle would ever have a problem with reporting dangerous criminals to ICE so they can be considered for deportation immediately. Thank you.
Mr. Thayer, please extend our feelings for your loss. I will say that there is a story on this, as well as a large packet for members with letters of support and opposition. With that, the rest of testimony, we have a long list of testifiers. We're going to start off with Mr. Zimmer. We have 11 or 12 now signed up, so Mr. Zimmer, if you could keep it short. We're going 2 minutes. There's a timer at the front of the room.
Chair Novotny and committee members, I am David Zimmer, Public Safety Policy Fellow with Center of the American Experiment. I appear today in support of House File 16. I'm going to shorten my comments to fit within the 2 minutes. It's important to know that House File 16 aligns well with current federal law, which states no state or local government entity may be permitted or in any way restricted from sending to or receiving from ICE information regarding the immigration status, lawful or unlawful, of an alien in the United States. As a bit of a background, I retired 3 years ago from local law enforcement. During my career, I served in several leadership capacities that involved cooperating with ICE, including as the captain of the Hennepin County Jail. I saw firsthand the importance of interagency cooperation with all our federal partners, including ICE. Last year, during the debate that surrounded the North Star bill, I became concerned with some of the narratives being used that didn't fit with the reality that I knew. I'd like to address House File 16 in the lens of some of those narratives. First, the idea that cooperating with ICE is a waste of finite time and resources for local law enforcement. It simply falls flat. A core tenet of law enforcement is that officers and agencies help each other when needed. This spirit of cooperation runs both ways, and it serves as the foundation for law enforcement, which depends on force multipliers to properly address public safety issues. Throughout my career, I personally worked with a myriad of federal agencies. I have about 15 listed here, but I won't go through them. Today's officers continue to routinely partner with federal authorities on a variety of matters. It's completely appropriate for our law enforcement to collect as much biographical data as they can when they detain somebody. It would be inappropriate for an officer not to attempt to determine the country of origin or nationality of a potential unauthorized immigrant that they are dealing with. This information facilitates several things, including mandated foreign consulate notifications, checking on the existence of outstate and international warrants, checking on the existence of terrorism watch list notifications, and assisting with future follow-up or attempts to locate the individual. It's important to note that our data practices statutes, which govern law enforcement data, already mandate the sharing of that information in many instances and allow for it in others. To suggest that we should create firewalls or carve out an exception to the sharing of this data with ICE is an uncalled for obstruction of an appropriate law enforcement process. House File 16 would also help address the problem created by ICE detainer requests. Due to the massive volume of unauthorized immigrants ICE is responsible for, ICE tends to rely almost solely on the civil detainer and deportation process rather than the more time-consuming criminal prosecution process. But this civil process doesn't mesh well with the detention timelines that govern local law enforcement. This dilemma would be eliminated by more timely and appropriate sharing of information with ICE, like we do with every other federal partner. Absent this timely notification, ICE is frequently unable to take custody of individuals at the time their local holds expire. I'll wrap it up here. I urge you to vote yes on House File 16. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. We have, next on the list will be Ben Gleckel, and then on deck is Madeline Lohman. Mr. Gleckel, please state your full name in the way it's supposed to be pronounced, because I don't think it probably got it right, and begin your testimony.
Mr. Chair and members, good afternoon. My name is Ben Gleckel, and I'm a removal defense attorney at the Immigrant Law Center in Minnesota. We are here to respectfully express opposition to HF 16. This bill will make all people residing in Minnesota less safe. Non-citizen and citizen victims of domestic violence and trafficking will suffer the most. They will not risk calling local law enforcement to report a crime if they know that it means their families will be separated, or that they themselves might be apprehended by immigration and customs enforcement as collateral. Requiring reporting to ICE and prohibiting entities that know their communities best from maintaining clear boundaries between state and federal government will erode the important trust that exists between our immigrant communities and our local law enforcement. We will all be less safe as a result. This bill will also have detrimental impacts on the rights of people in Minnesota. Immigrants and even U.S. citizens in our state are already being approached and subsequently detained by ICE agents based on the color of their skin alone. Facilitating the deportation of a person for an arrest stemming from a mere suspicion is a disproportionate measure. Families will be separated and people will be deported to countries where their lives are at risk, not because of a valid criminal charge or conviction that they received, but because of an arrest based on suspicion alone. Mandatory notification to ICE will circumvent Minnesota's criminal justice process by facilitating the deportation of a person before their case has concluded, eroding due process rights along the way. For these reasons, we respectfully ask the committee to vote no on HF 16. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gleckel. Next up, Madeline Lohman. On deck, Joshua Muscatento. State your full name and begin your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Madeline Lohman. Thank you, Chair Novotny, Lead Mueller, and members of the committee. The Advocates for Human Rights respectfully opposes HF 16. Other testifiers are going to speak about public safety, trust, resources, domestic violence. I am going to talk about how this bill provides a tool in the hands of human traffickers to keep their victims scared and trapped. Minnesota is a national leader in combating sex and labor trafficking, and the laws and appropriations that we put towards this issue are bipartisan. HF 16 threatens to undo that work. Our organization provides legal services to foreign national victims of trafficking and collaborates with organizations and government agencies around the state to improve policies, protocols, and responses. We see firsthand the negative consequences for individuals, communities, and public safety when the line between federal immigration enforcement and local government gets blurred. In one recent case, an abusive employer threatened not to renew visas for nearly 100 farm workers, using that threat to keep them in houses with inadequate heat, forcing them to work without clean water or bathroom breaks, and refusing to let them leave the property unless they were monitored at all times. Facing threats of immigration enforcement, the workers felt safe to come forward only because of policies that protected them from retaliatory reports to immigration enforcement. Without these policies, the case against the trafficker would not have been successful. We also work on cases where children were forced to work in factories, agriculture, and street vending by predatory traffickers who refused to let them attend immigration court hearings, resulting in adverse rulings that keep the children in exploitative conditions. Separation policies let us assure these children that they can talk to our law enforcement partners safely. In case after case, we see that traffickers manipulate and exploit fear of immigration enforcement, even in situations where a person has legal status in the United States. If state and local law enforcement agencies cannot send a clear message that they are not extensions of ICE, that they care about individual and community safety above immigration status, then trafficking victims will listen to traffickers who tell them that no one cares, no one will help, and there is no way out. The Advocate for Human Rights respectfully urges the committee to vote no on HF 16. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Joshua Muscanto.
Chair and members
Next up
of the
is
committee,
Lillian
my name is
Next up
Joshua.
is Lillian Carcamo, and state your full name and begin your testimony.
Chair and members of the committee, my name is Joshua Musicanto. I've worked in the security industry for nearly 14 years. I currently work third shift as a level 2 officer in downtown Minneapolis. Over the years, I have handled a large range of security issues, including arson, trespassing, vandalism, domestic violence, stalking, suicides, behavioral crises, accidents, muggings, and sexual assault. We are the first preventers. Our union, SEIU Local 26, takes safety very seriously. Today, I am speaking in opposition to HF 16, which I believe will make Minnesota less safe by eroding community trust and overburdening law enforcement with additional duties not directly related to the safety of our state. What's more, HF 16 could potentially lead to civil rights violations. The State Department's Catch and Revoke program is currently making use of an anti-Semitic McCarthy-era law to revoke student visas of protesters, but with a modern twist. They're using AI to monitor social media accounts. We have already seen the devastating effects of the Catch and Revoke program, including the detainment of Mahmoud Khalil by ICE. This is 1952 meets 1984. Now is not the time to sit and play dead whenever ICE commands. This is our state, our tax dollars. We have a right to make sure those dollars are spent on things that actually make our state safer, like more training for security officers, more resources for victims of domestic violence, common sense gun control, and addressing the economic insecurities that are at the root of the majority of crimes. If someone needed my help, I would hope their immigration status would not make them hesitate to approach me. We cannot afford to go backwards on building community trust for the sake of Trump's agenda, an agenda that most of us Minnesotans do not support. While there are many bills I would endorse to advance the safety of our state, when it comes to HF 16, which I believe will make us less safe, I ask you to vote no.
Thank you. Lillian Carcamo, and next up is David Campana.
Dear Chairman Novotny and members of committee, my name is Lillian Carcamo. I live in Coon Rapids, Minnesota. My son Josue is reading my testimony. I fled abuse in Guatemala and arrived in the United States in 2004. I began dating a man here who I will call Ivan. Unfortunately, he drank and physically abused me. One time he bottomed me. He head bottomed me so hard he split open my forehead. I ended that relationship, but he discovered I was pregnant with Ivan's child. Shortly after, I went with a friend to rent a video, and I saw Ivan. He did not know I was pregnant. I tried talking with him, but he had another woman with him. I asked who she was, and the other woman said, "I'm his wife." "Who are you?" I didn't know he was married. He lied and said to her, "I don't recognize this woman." I was upset and told him I was pregnant with his child. His wife was also pregnant. I asked for an explanation, but he struck me twice in the face. I left the store with my face badly wounded. My friend took pictures of my face, and together we went to the police station and reported Ivan's beating me. If I had thought the police were going to report me to immigration, I would not have gone. The police later arrested Ivan for the crimes he committed against me. He made a plea bargain. Eventually, I was able to ask for a U visa for victims of crime and get permanent residency. On November 25, 2024, I became a U.S. citizen. I ask you to oppose House File 16 so others in situations like mine feel safe enough to help the police. I had submitted a longer version of my story. Thank you for your time. Lilian Carcamo, United States citizen.
Next up, David Campana, and on deck is Sarah Silva. Please state your name and begin your testimony.
Thank you, dear Chairman Novotny and committee members. My name is David Campana. I am the Legislative and Policy Director in Economic Development for the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs. The Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs is a state agency that advises and informs the legislature and government on issues relevant to our diverse Latino communities. The Council wishes to express its opposition to House File 16. These proposals are detrimental to our constituents and counterproductive to public safety, undermining the trust between local authorities and immigrant communities. The proposed legislation will also have negative economic impacts by compromising the important contributions of the immigrant population to the Minnesota economy. A recent report by the Minnesota Chamber Foundation has found that, quote, nearly 60% of the state's total labor force and employment growth came from foreign-born workers from 2019 to 2023. And also, that Minnesota's foreign-born population is becoming more highly educated, skilled, and entrepreneurial, which could spur future innovation and productivity. Being an immigrant myself, I am proud of the contributions of immigrants to our state, although I am assure you that it has not been an easy ride. Originally from Peru, a labor and human rights attorney, practitioner, and university professor, I had to learn a new language, go back to school to earn a master's degree, and eventually find my way to insert myself in a new place that I now call home. This is a difficult journey that we immigrants have to navigate. Immigration non-cooperation policies that create separation between local officials, work, and federal immigration enforcement contribute to public safety and well-being for all Minnesotans. The Council trusts you that you will make the right decision in preventing policies to protect the vulnerable and promote a safer Minnesota. Thank you for your time and attention to this important matter.
Thank you. Next up, Sarah Silva. On deck, Mantha Chum. State your name, begin your testimony.
Sarah Silva. Members of the committee, thank you so much for.
You gotta have to get closer to the mic, ma'am.
Can you guys hear me a little bit? Okay. Dear members of the committee, thank you so much for gathering today for this bill. I know we are busy this season. My name is Sarah Silva, and I am the policy coordinator for the North Star Alliance. The North Star Alliance includes dozens of community-based and faith-based organizations who believe in the dignity and respect of one another without exception. We strongly oppose House File 16, which would erode local control of finite government resources and has the potential to pit Minnesota communities and counties against each other. It prohibits local policies of non-cooperation, overriding community-based approaches designed to foster trust and safety. Minnesota's police department cannot afford another lawsuit. Minnesota's police department cannot afford another murder like George Floyd's. Minnesota cannot afford farms, agriculture. Do we really have more money right now to pay for any of those things? You rely on immigrants, and I'm proud to be from Mexico. We need to understand that this isn't us against them. We are in serious trouble, and it's time for you guys to talk to each other and work together. We are tired. Taxpayers deserve more than you guys funding jails. You would actually save money. Who doesn't want to save money? We need it for food. Let's be honest about what is happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mantha Chum, and on deck, Commissioner Barnett. State your name and begin your testimony, please.
I'm sorry. My name is Mantha Chum, and I'm the Executive Director of Minnesota 8 and a co-founder there. I am here today to express my strong opposition to HF 16. We must keep our community safe and allow community values to be at the center of our policies. HF 16 is based on false narratives around immigrants that is designed to divide us, dehumanize us, and weaken our bonds to one another. This rhetoric is really dangerous and fuels policies that strip away dignity and human rights. Instead of division, I ask for you to listen to our stories. To understand the harmful impacts of this bill, I stand before all of you to remind us about the true stories of immigrants and refugees like myself, many of whom cannot be in the room today. Minnesota is home to one of the largest Southeast Asian refugee populations in the world. During the Vietnam War, the United States dropped more than 2 million tons of bombs in Laos and Cambodia and waged illegal warfare using tactics that are now banned because of how atrocious they were. This caused the mass displacement of over 1.2 million Southeast Asian refugees. We are here because the United States was there. Refugees came here because our homelands were bombed, destroyed, and destabilized. My family survived the killing fields during the Khmer Rouge, a genocide that stole the lives of over 1.3 million Cambodians. People were forced into labor camps. I'm sorry. They were separated from their families and persecuted. Refugees and immigrants have survived unimaginable violence. These are the true narratives of immigrants, and all we've ever dreamed of is to be in a peaceful and safe world. Many immigrants came here because they yearned for safety. However, ICE detention and deportation reflects the cruel conditions of wartime concentration camps and are parallel to the extreme violence we once fled from. For many, it's a death sentence. And once we fled, for many, since January, dozens of people have come to us because their loved ones have been detained at work, in their cars, and at their senior living facilities and in their homes. My brother, I experienced this very firsthand because in 2016, my brother was detained and picked up for ICE, and I watched his young daughter not understanding why her dad would never come home. And right now, we have a choice to choose humanity. HF 16 is a threat to public safety, and it is opposite of everything Minnesota stands for. I urge you to choose love over fear. Reject HF 16 and instead pass policies that center our shared humanity. Every single person deserves safety and dignity, especially refugees and immigrants who survived the unspeakable to be here today. And as a follower of Jesus, I just want to end with this. We need to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, ensure justice for those being crushed. Yes, really speak up for the poor and helpless and see that they get justice. True justice does not favor the powerful at the expense of the weak, but seeks to bring about flourishing for all, especially the oppressed and marginalized. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett, state your full name and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Todd Barnett. I'm the Commissioner of Community Safety for the City of Minneapolis. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the City of Minneapolis related to this bill. First and foremost, I want to highlight that the legislation here would have a profound negative impact on our community safety operations in the City of Minneapolis. As you know, we've gone through a lot as a city since 2020 with the murder of George Floyd, civil unrest, and the COVID pandemic as it relates to community trust. When communities trust local government, especially local law enforcement, residents are more likely to report crimes, cooperate with investigations, and engage with police. If community members fear that interaction with city staff or law enforcement could lead to immigration enforcement, they may avoid reporting crimes or seeking help, which can undermine our public safety efforts. Many people may avoid accessing essential services such as healthcare, education, and social services if they fear that these interactions might expose them to immigration enforcement. Maintaining community trust ensures that all residents and visitors to the City of Minneapolis, regardless of immigration status, can access necessary services without fear of repercussions. By preempting Minneapolis and other cities' separation ordinance, this bill would result in decreased safety for Minneapolis and its residents, and it would directly impact the trust that the public and residents have with the city and with our city staff and officers. The City of Minneapolis' separation ordinance, which was passed over 20 years ago, clearly states that the city employees shall not inquire about immigration status except in limited circumstances. It also indicates that the city employees, including law enforcement officers and emergency personnel, should not participate in immigration operations. And there are limited exceptions to that. As a whole, the ordinance was advanced to increase trust between the city and its residents. This is especially important for individuals who are vulnerable to exploitation, people who have been exploited, or people who are victims of crime for whom there should be no barriers to them reporting a crime or seeking services to address trauma or harm. We strongly believe that this measure, if advanced, will not promote public safety, but instead decrease community trust in our government and make our society less safe. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. And Commissioner Barnett, are you going to be sticking around? I know some of the members might have questions for you.
Yes.
Okay. And for the other testifiers that have been here, if you can, please stick around if there's any questions for you. Next up is Jess Palion of Violence Free Minnesota. On deck is Darcy McCampbell.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Jess Palion. I'm the Policy Program Manager at Violence Free Minnesota. We are the statewide coalition against domestic violence, and we consist of over 90 member programs who provide direct services to victims, survivors of domestic and sexual violence in every corner of Minnesota. Domestic violence is about power and control. Any vulnerability that a survivor presents becomes a lever which can be pulled to maintain or establish power and control. Immigration status is one of those levers. House File 16 would exacerbate pre-existing barriers that undocumented survivors face when trying to interact with law enforcement and other public safety resources. Without having access to an external support system, undocumented survivors will be made more vulnerable to domestic violence. In 2018, the ACLU released the results of a survey of police officers, judges, and prosecutors about the impacts of stricter immigration control on the willingness of undocumented people to cooperate in investigations and report crime. In the survey, 69% of police officers and 82% of prosecutors said that they believed that domestic violence had become harder to investigate due to victim unwillingness to come forward. This data squares with everything we've heard from our direct service providers and advocates around the unique challenges faced by undocumented survivors of violence. Some quotes from our member programs on this issue include, "There is a lot of fear for undocumented survivors and often threats made by their abuser that they'll be deported or lose their kids." Another quote, "Survivors fear ICE. They fear their abuser calling ICE. They fear their abuser having all their papers. They fear their abuser threatening to keep kids and have the victim deported." Even when a survivor is a documented immigrant, their abuser might control their important identifying documents, visa paperwork, or other crucial documentation. They may also prevent survivors from making it to crucial appointments regarding their immigration status. Immigration law and the rights available to immigrants is inherently complicated, fast-changing, and bureaucratic. Adding in a layer of abuse makes it even more likely that these barriers result in somebody losing their status, or at the very least, not being able to prove their legal status. Because of these power dynamics, laws like House File 16 put documented immigrants at an increased risk of negative immigration consequences when they suffer abuse. Undocumented survivors of violence are your neighbors. They deserve your support, and they deserve to have a state which supports their ability to seek justice when harmed. There's more to say, but I will wrap with this. I want to draw attention to a letter in your packet from all 6 crime victim services coalitions. We all signed this because there is consensus among us that keeping Minnesota safer involves making sure that everybody can access law enforcement resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Darcy McCampbell. Next up on deck is Eder Castillo. Go ahead, state your name, begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Darcy McCampbell. I live in Minneapolis, and I work as a registered nurse based in the Twin Cities. I'm here to express my opposition to HF 16. The testimony I'm giving is my own and does not represent my employers. As a nurse, I have the privilege of serving both as a community health nurse, focused on creating healthier and more equitable communities, and a forensic nurse, navigating the intersections between healthcare and the criminal legal system in order to interrupt cycles of violence and injustice. In my community health role, I work across the state to bridge gaps in access to healthcare for Minnesota's diverse communities. As a forensic nurse, I work in the emergency department to provide acute care to individuals who've experienced sexual violence, intimate partner violence, trafficking, and exploitation. Trust is fundamental to providing the essential trauma-informed healthcare following an assault. Forensic exams move at the speed of trust in order to understand what each unique individual needs for healing, hope, and safety. For some individuals, that process includes reporting to law enforcement. Across my nursing roles, I often serve individuals who are undocumented, newly arrived, refugees, and other non-citizens. As I navigate the intersection between healthcare and the criminal legal system, I'm acutely aware of the barriers that exist for immigrant communities. Without trust that information will not be shared with immigration authorities, victims and survivors, regardless of their legal status, will be less willing to seek out the care they need and deserve. This bill erodes that trust in local law enforcement and risks harm to community health for all Minnesotans. As a nurse and Minnesota resident, I stand firmly against HF 16. It is essential that we foster an environment where all Minnesotans can feel safe to access care, free from fear of discrimination or deportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Castillo, and next up is Anna Patsran-Costa. State your name, begin your testimony, please.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to testify again. Eder Castillo, Senior Assistant County Attorney for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. In conjunction with HF 772, HF 16 drafts our police officers, prosecutors, and corrections officers into the federal immigration bureaucracy. HF 16 undermines 3 shared responsibilities: the responsibility to wisely steward law enforcement resources, to stand up for victims of crime, and to bring violent and dangerous offenders to justice. I'll take each one in part. First of all, it would divert resources from our police and our prosecutors away from crime fighting and into filing reports and identifying people's immigration statuses, all without extra funding from this body or from the federal government. Every minute spent working for the federal immigration bureaucracy is a minute not spent crime fighting. Envision this: slower 911 response times, less time for violent investigations, less time for training and readiness. This is a tax on the time of our police and our prosecutors. Second, HF 16 would prevent victims and witnesses from talking to our police and from testifying in our trials. We are already seeing this all across the state. That's why our office passed the nation's best U&T visa policy in order to secure witnesses, which we do, and to secure convictions, which we also do. Last of all, violent and dangerous offenders would brandish HF 16 like a weapon. Who needs a gun when you have HF 16? Who needs a knife when you have HF 16? HF 16 would give violent and dangerous offenders a menu of false accusations to lodge against victims to silence them or even disappear them out of this country. Violent and dangerous offenders will escape justice if HF 16 passes, and they will have free rein to run roughshod through our neighborhoods. HF 16 makes Minnesotans less safe. Our office joins the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, the County Attorneys Association, the League of Minnesota Cities, and a Crime Victims Coalition, and urge this committee to swiftly reject HF 16. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I will bet, in that case, once again, remind the committee that that is not the position that the Sheriff's Office took. They said they had concerns, but not opposition. There is one person that was added to the testimony list, but I can't read my handwriting. First name Evan, and are you Anna?
Yes.
Please state your full name and begin your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Patratz Acosta, and I'm a professor of law at Mitchell-Hamlin. And I'll begin my testimony. So I am a professor at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I specialize in the areas of immigration law, public benefits for non-citizens, and immigration status as a social determinant of health. And I'm here today to present my testimony to this committee in my professional capacity as a law professor with specialized knowledge regarding the intersection of immigration law and health law in opposition to House File 16. Specifically, I submit this testimony to express my opposition to House File 16 on account of the language in the bill in its current form that inadequately protects the private health information and school enrollment information, as well as other private data from disclosure. Additionally, I submit this testimony in opposition to House File 16 on account of the likely harm this bill would have on the health and welfare of Minnesota's immigrant community. In its current form, House File 16 would prohibit Minnesota government entities or responsible authorities from limiting or restricting the sharing of information or personal data pertaining to immigration status that's maintained by Minnesota government entities with federal agencies for immigration enforcement purposes. The broad scope of the language in House File 16, so specifically the proposed amendments to Minnesota Statute 13.02, Section 1, paragraphs A and B, which would require all Minnesota government entities, including schools and healthcare providers, to comply with requests for data by federal government agencies for immigration enforcement purposes, directly conflicts with existing federal and state data protection laws, including the Minnesota Data Practices Act, as well as HIPAA and FERPA, which are federal laws pertaining to health and school education records. While House File 16 does contain carve-out language permitting exceptions or restrictions as required by any other state or local law, no such language exists to account for conflicting federal law, including HIPAA and FERPA. Because Minnesota government entities include covered healthcare entities, for example, HCMC Medical System operated by Hennepin County, which are subject to HIPAA in public schools, like the University of Minnesota, it fails to account for conflicts with existing federal law. For this reason and for other reasons set forth in my written testimony, I oppose House File 16. Thank you.
Thank you. Evan Haramoda. Please state your name and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Novotny and Representative Mueller, for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Evan Hermada, and I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. I have a master's degree in public policy and a master's degree in public health from the University of Minnesota. I oppose HF 16. HF 16 would erode public health and consequently erode public safety. Strong public health creates strong public safety. The goal of this bill is to promote public safety, but instead, this bill will make our communities less safe by further pressing undocumented immigrants to live in the shadows. Prohibiting non-cooperation of government entities will harm communities when immigrant communities fear seeking treatment. In addition to this, HF 16 conflicts with HIPAA, the Federal Health Data Privacy Act. HF 16 attempts to prohibit safeguarding of data relating to immigration status by any state and government employees, including by any local or county public health department. Access to quality and affordable health care should not be dependent upon immigration status. This bill has the effect of removing access to treatment for undocumented immigrants while increasing prices for people with legal status. Undocumented immigrants already have less access to health insurance compared to legal residents. Less access to insurance will increase as the state removes the opportunity for undocumented immigrants to seek treatment without fear of data being reported to immigration officials. My studies in public health taught me more healthy people in the insurance pool will spread the risk for everyone, resulting in lower premiums. Our goal should be to make insurance more accessible without fear of data being shared to facilitate premiums decreasing. Data from the Migration Policy Institute shows that only 18% of the undocumented immigrant population in the state are over 45 years old, meaning that 82% of undocumented immigrants in the insurance pool who could be chilled out of their policy or scared out of applying to one in the first place. These are people who could help bring premium prices down for you and residents in your district so long as they feel safe seeking government assistance. We have seen consequences outside of insurance that follow when undocumented immigrants skip preventative care and resort to emergency rooms when their needs become acute. Once undocumented immigrants have to seek emergency care without insurance, then costs increase for emergency visits as the ERs raise prices to make up the difference. This means higher prices for constituents. Undocumented immigrants who seek vaccines at county public health departments will fear their data being sent out to federal immigration enforcement, and this may affect their willingness to get vaccinated. The vaccine rate of Minnesota is already not what it needs to be for many important childhood vaccines. Even the smallest decline of community vaccination rates places everyone at risk for preventable diseases. Minnesota Health Fairview explains that for herd immunity from measles, a 95% vaccination rate is required in communities. The Minnesota Department of Health shows that only 77% of the state have received full doses of the MMR by the age of 6. Even the best data suggests that for newborns, the MMR vaccine rate is at 93%. So this bill will increase insurance premiums, medical care costs, and risk of preventable disease while decreasing community safety. For these reasons, I urge you to vote in opposition of HF 16.
Thank you. That'll conclude the listed testifiers. Commissioner Barnett, Representative Woody has a question for you.
Thank you, Chair Novotny.
Mr. Barnett, state your name, please, again, and go ahead, Vice Chair Woody.
Yes, I'm Todd Barnett. I'm the Commissioner of Community Safety for the City of Minneapolis.
Thank you. And during your testimony, you said that the officers have limitations for asking on immigration status. What are the limitations?
Commissioner Barnett.
Chair, Representative, some of those limitations part of it comes from the ordinance, and the other limitations come from policy in which we don't ask immigration status of individuals. I mean, that's the general rule.
Are there any cases that they're asked? Because you said there was limitations for asking.
No,
Commissioner Barnett.
Chair, Representative, there's no limitations as far as cases are concerned.
And my last question.
Vice Chair Whitty.
Sorry. My last question is, since 2020, how many law enforcement agencies is the Minneapolis PD working with to keep their community safe?
Commissioner Barnett.
Chair, Representative, I don't know that number off the top of my head from 2020 until now, the number of agencies that Minneapolis Police Department has worked with, but we have several different agencies that Minneapolis Police are detailed with, like the U.S. Marshals. We also work with DEA as well on certain cases where we have the same interests. There's multiple jurisdictions that work together in different task force, but I don't know the number off the top of my head. I couldn't even give you a ballpark from 2020.
Well, and I was actually,
Vice Chair Whitty.
I was actually looking at like today. I know you got State Patrol, all these different agencies, and it's law enforcement working the law enforcement to keep our communities safe. So
yeah,
that's what I was, and then you kind of answered it. So thank you.
Commissioner Barnett.
Chair, Representative, yes, today, I think the biggest thing that I've seen since I've come into this job over a year ago is that any incident, our first responders, whether it's law enforcement or not, work very well together. If there is a issue that requires the State Patrol or Hennepin County Attorney's Office or a federal agency in which we have a similar interest, then we'll work together to do that. Yes.
Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let's kind of break this down here. We heard that this bill breaks community trust, it costs money, and who doesn't like saving money? That somehow it makes our state less safe, that this is our state and our tax dollars that are being put at risk if we comply with this bill, and that simply complying with this bill also takes time away from crime fighting. But the good news is, if you are not a murderer, a rapist, an assailant, a gang affiliate, a carjacker, a robber, or a kidnapper, it's your lucky day. This does not apply to you. As of January 21st, this is who it would apply to. It would apply to Christopher Alexander Ramirez Olivia, who was detained by ICE in St. Paul for criminal sexual conduct with a minor. It would apply to Hernando Fidel Avila Gamez, a man in Faribault, who was convicted of felony burglary and criminal sexual conduct. It would apply to a man found in St. Paul, Octavio Juarez Bonilla, who had possession of child pornography. Jesus Baltzar, assault of a child. St. Paul, Oscar Alexander Cruz Rodriguez, a rape of a minor in Venezuela that he was awaiting court on. Alonzo Luna Perez, 2 counts of assault with intent of sexual abuse. I have more. That's who this bill applies to. This bill applies to nobody else. So when we're saying that it's going to break down public safety, that it's going to break down community trust, it's only going to improve that. Because if those people are in our communities committing those acts, we don't want them there. We don't want those people free to roam and create more victims out of Minnesotans. And I beg the question, what interest in public safety does a law enforcement officer, or an agency, a prosecutor, an attorney general, what interest is there in public safety and maintaining public safety in them not complying with this very law? And if there is a logical answer, I don't know.
Get it together.
Thank you for that. Where is the public safety interest in protecting folks that I just listed off? And I have more I could go with. If there's a logical answer, I'm waiting for it. Thank you.
Representative Engen, was there a question in there, or, and if so, was it for Representative Rymer or Commissioner Barnett?
Nope, just open question.
Does anyone else, before we go on, anyone else have a question that'll be directed at Commissioner Barnett, or can he step down from the? Thank you, Commissioner, if you can step down.
Thank you.
Representative Curran.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask if we could have Ms. Patrez Acosta come back up for a question.
If what?
Ms. Patrez Acosta, if she
All
could
right.
come back up for a question.
Please state your name again for the transcribers and begin, and go ahead, Representative Curran.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Anna Patratz Acosta, Professor of Law at Mitchell-Hamlin.
Thank you,
Representative
Chair. We heard a really tragic testimony earlier involving domestic abuse and murder. Clearly an awful, awful situation that should happen to no one. Just thinking about the, real world application or implications of this bill in particular, and as we're trying to tackle issues like that, would House File 16 have prevented the criminal actions in that case?
I don't have your name, but go ahead. Acosta.
Ms.
Go ahead.
Acosta. That's fine. So before I respond to the question, I just want to echo your comments and express to Mr. Thayer's son, who testified earlier today, that I'm also incredibly sorry for his loss and can't even begin to imagine the pain his family has gone through after losing a loved one in such a senseless tragedy. However, to answer your question, with respect to immigration law, unfortunately, no. The proposed statutory amendments contained in House File 16 would not have prevented this tragedy. When Mr. Sabort Viltrez was present in the U.S. When he committed this crime, it actually had nothing to do with lack of cooperation or sharing of information between local law enforcement in Minnesota and ICE agents working for the Department of Homeland Security. The reality is the sad truth is that this was sort of a perfect storm of events that largely had to do with the fact that he happened to be a national of Cuba, which is a country that historically does not accept deportees because of the strained diplomatic relationship between the United States and Cuba that dates back to the Cold War and the start of the Cuban embargo during the Eisenhower and Kennedy administrations in the 1950s and 60s. And just to explain a little bit further, provide a little bit more context, based on the information that I read ahead of today's hearing, it appeared as though he did have an unexecuted removal order, which likely did stem from those previous criminal convictions, which would have made him deportable. And ICE was unable to execute the removal order because he was a national of Cuba. And following a 2001 Supreme Court decision in Zedvidas v. Davis, ICE is only allowed to hold an immigrant for a maximum of 180 days after they have received a final removal order if they're not able to execute the removal order and remove them to their country of origin within the foreseeable future. So because of the strained diplomatic relations between Cuba and the United States, he was likely released on an order of supervision pending the ability of the United States government to be able to deport him to Cuba. The other thing, too, to keep in mind with an order of supervision is that you have to report to ICE every 6 months or every year. So ICE was likely already very well aware of his whereabouts and location because he would have needed to report to them. The other thing, too, that I think is important to clarify in terms of existing cooperation agreements between state and local law enforcement in Minnesota and the federal government, specifically Homeland Security and ICE, is that we already have a system in place where anytime somebody is arrested and booked and their fingerprints are run through a system, it goes through a number of databases, including the Department of Homeland Security. So when he would have been arrested most recently for arson, ICE would already be aware of that arrest, and his presence would have been flagged in ICE's system when that check was run. And that is a process that has been in place going back about 20 years, shortly after 9/11, when those electronic centralized databases were created. So to answer the question, no, it wouldn't have prevented it. And also, really more than anything, because we have systems to run people's information through a database at the time of arrest, House File 16 really is seeking to address a problem that doesn't really exist.
Representative Curran.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks, Ms. Acosta. If you don't have to hang out there if you don't want to, but okay. So Representative Rymer, we've never had the chance to work together, but I appreciated that during all of the testimony, you appeared to be listening and thinking about the input that people have been providing. Victims advocates, the Sheriff's Association didn't oppose, but I'm so sorry. Apparently I'm speaking too quickly and not into the mic. There are concerns expressed by a really broad variety of stakeholders, and you really appeared to be listening, and I appreciate that. I did want to make one point about Representative Ingen's list of folks. All of those individuals, their information would have been shared already with the federal government under the underlying bill that Representative Swedzinski was seeking to amend. So I just wanted to make it clear that this House File 16 doesn't actually impact any of those individuals. So I feel strongly that, based on all of the testimony and my 25 years working in the field of immigration law, that this is not good for public safety and that it's harmful to immigrant communities here in Minnesota. And I wanted to highlight for a moment the bipartisan work that I have had the privilege of doing with my colleagues across the aisle since I was first elected and served since 2021. My first session, we passed a bipartisan bill to improve the U visa process for immigrant victims of crimes. I worked closely with the Chiefs of Police Association, and that legislation passed through a divided legislature. We also passed both House and Senate floor individually a bill to protect neglected, abandoned, or abused immigrant youth. And that passed unanimously off the Republican floor, and two people voted against it on the DFL side, so I did worse than my Republican author. We also last year passed a bill that passed off the House floor individually with broad bipartisan support, a bill that clarified the definition or changed the definition of a gross misdemeanor in Minnesota so that there weren't collateral immigration consequences of a state-level crime, that Minnesota gets to decide what the impact of a crime in Minnesota is, not the federal government. And lastly, I just wanted to lift up the bipartisan work we did around labor trafficking, updating some definitions to protect immigrant construction workers primarily, and that, again, was really bipartisan. So in my time here in the legislature, I've been really gratified that this issue has not been a political football, and that we've been able to do meaningful work together. And those bills really represent an understanding that immigrants are not a monolith. They're not all the same, and that they're not just a political tool. They're people who live in our state. And forgive me for getting all immigration lawyer professory, but I just wanted to really mention the fact that our immigration laws are atrophied. That's the word I like to use. We haven't proactively updated them since 1990. The world was really different. Our economy was really different. Technology was different. The workplace was different. And what we did over time, 1952, 1965, 1990, is we were like, what does America need? What does our healthcare system need? Was our workforce need? Was our economy need? And we updated our laws. And we haven't done that in decades. And, bills like this are going to make life a lot harder for exactly the people that if Congress would do their job, they would promote immigration pathways for these folks. It's low-wage caregivers, in particular in rural areas. A lot of the caregivers for our seniors are undocumented. It's agricultural workers. I forget the exact number, but like 40 to 50% of workers on farms are undocumented. And lastly, in construction industry, it's 20% of our construction industry. Those workers are undocumented, and we need them. And if we could change federal law to actually create a work visa for these folks, that would be really good. I don't know if that's going to happen. And so I just, I see bills like this and feel that they're based on this sort of erroneous premise that immigrants are inherently problematic for public safety. And so again, I just really want to focus committee's attention on the materials submitted by the conservative Cato Institute's David Beer, who I'm a fangirl of, I'll admit. But he provides just some good charts and some graphs, just kind of showing that the data is really clear that immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, are not more likely to commit crimes. In fact, they're less likely. And also, he has a really good chart just looking at cities with separation ordinances, like the ones impacted by House File 16, and that cities with large undocumented communities actually saw a decrease in their murder rates, even those that had these separation ordinances. So I just think it's really important to highlight that data. I think it's really important to think about what is public safety. And I don't think it is about looking at immigrants as this sort of inherent public safety threat. The real public safety issue is, can people call 911 for help when they need it? And I think that's the work that we try to do here in this committee. And so, again, I appreciated that you really seemed to listen as people sat next to you and shared their thoughts and their expertise. And we have a kind of bizarrely broad coalition of people who have concerns, from the Sheriff's Association to the Minneapolis City Council, and I can't imagine they agree on that many things. And so, I'm opposed to this bill for the reasons that were raised today, and I hope that you will kind of think about the point of this bill and the goals that you have around public safety, and maybe reconsider. So thank you.
Representative Rymer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe just the one thing I'll say is, in terms of the data that you referenced, Representative, from the Cato Institute, it does create a problem here in Minnesota specifically. Minnesota is an anomaly sometimes, good and bad, and we don't collect data on potentially how many illegal immigrants are actually committing crimes, what is the crime rate among that specific population. So, even though there might be a trend, just even talking about maybe the total number of potential people who are here who are undocumented, even that data was hard to crawl through and find. So maybe just the one thing I'll say, addressing your broader point, was that we don't have specific data on what you're claiming in Minnesota.
Representative
Okay.
Feist.
I'll be short, and then I did have one just technical question, if that's all right, Mr. Chair.
As long as there's a question at some
There
point.
is a question. Just so you know, the chart, and I can give you a copy of the report, it's a ton of cities across the country. Big cities, some with separation ordinances, some not. So it's not just Minneapolis data. This is a national study. And then I did have a question about, on the final page of your bill, line 4.6. It talks about the definition of an undocumented person. And I was just curious. So your definition talks about the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And so I was just wondering if somebody is on a J-1 visa, which is a Department of State issued visa, and they get a DS 2019 form, which is a Department of State form, and then they get admitted by the Customs and Border Protection and get I-94 record, which is what their status is and when it expires, but they are never seen by USCIS. Are they an undocumented person?
Representative Rymer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, I don't have that information in particular right now, but I'm happy to get that to you after the committee today.
Representative Feist.
They're definitely here legally, and so would investor visas who just come through the Department of State and CBP. F1 students get documents from ICE and are admitted by CBP. They never have any interaction with USCIS. So I think your definition is excluding or including a lot of people who are here lawfully. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Response, Representative Rymer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No.
With that, we'll recess at the call of the chair.